America just bombed Somalia and hundreds of people have been killed. Plus, Egypt just signed a $35 billion deal with Israel, and Cambodia is preparing for a war with Thailand. And a whole lot more. So here's all the news from just the last 24 hours. Well, first, America just bombed Somalia only days after they bombed Venezuela, and hundreds of people have been killed in these strikes. The US has literally called it, quote, the largest airstrike in the history of the world. But if you don't know, the US has actually been carrying out loads of airstrikes onto Somalia. They've carried out more airstrikes under Trump than they did under Biden, Bush, Obama combined. According to reports, the US has carried out over 111 airstrikes onto Somalia under the US President Trump. This isn't a small thing, but you need to know why the US is actually doing this, because to be fair, most people didn't even know this was happening. If you don't know, since the government of Somalia collapsed decades ago, there hasn't really been any government in power. This makes it a great haven for terrorism, because there's nobody to fight the terrorists. Specifically, a big one of those groups being Al-Shabaab. They're an ally of Al-Qaeda. They were kind of created by them. As well as that, there's ISIS and loads of other groups. Well, because these groups regularly threaten to attack the US sees it in their interest to attack these groups. And well, that's what they've been doing. Just 2 days ago, the US carried out a massive attack onto the northeastern mountains of Kismayo, killing dozens of these terrorists. But to be fair, the US does have a good reason for doing this. Even though it's a very small government that's in charge, the US is still doing this in cooperation with the official government of Somalia. These terrorist groups have been fighting against the government of Somalia for years. They want to control the entire country. But this year, the fighting has gotten really bad, and possibly 7,000 people have been killed because of it so far this year. So the US wants to stop that, especially as these groups threaten the US anyway. Not to mention that the US mainly carries out attacks onto mountain ranges where these groups hide, so it's very unlikely they're killing civilians. Reports also confirm that very few civilians are ever affected by these attacks. But still, most people don't even know this is happening, especially as the US just isn't talking about it. But whilst I'm on the topic of the US, stick around because the rest of the news I'm about to tell you is far more important than what I just said. Well, today, in response to the US seizing their oil tankers, Venezuela sent their navy to escort their oil tankers to make sure that that doesn't happen. They risked being attacked by the US Navy, but they didn't care. Although this was a huge embarrassment to the US, and you need to know about this because it comes just a day after the US said that not a single Venezuelan oil tanker would leave Venezuela. But it actually gets worse. The US decided to go back on what they said and not stop the oil tankers. The US said, quote, "We were aware of the Navy escorts and we were considering various courses of action." But rather than simply trying to seize the Venezuelan oil tankers like they said they were going to, they just watched them sail past and they let the oil tankers leave. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I'm just saying it's what the US said they wouldn't do. Venezuela said, quote, "Our oil tankers will sail with full security, technical support and operational guarantees from the Navy in order to secure their right to freedom of navigation." So this is Venezuela sending a very clear message to the US that they will not back down without a fight. If the US wants to block Venezuelan oil tankers, they can, but they will not do it without going through the Venezuelan Navy. But the report did hint to this. The report said, quote, "A naval blockade is much more aggressive. Once you impose a naval blockade, you are not far away from using kinetic force." But as I said, Venezuela, with them doing this today, it shows that they are not afraid of the US and they are prepared to fight against the US. This also really doesn't make the US look good. It sends a very clear message that the US will not follow through with what they say because they're possibly afraid of fighting Venezuela. The US warships off the coast of Venezuela, which were meant to be blocking these Venezuelan oil tankers, literally watched them sail past. They didn't do anything because the Venezuelan Navy was escorting them. It's not a great look and nobody is talking about this. You might have just realized that that's the whole point of this. I cover the news that nobody else talks about. Especially what I'm about to tell you. Nobody is covering this and it's literally about to start a war. Today, Cambodia said, quote, "We are fully prepared to respond to any attacks or invasions into our territory." And you need to know that this comes just a day after Thailand said they seized Cambodian territory, invaded the country and planted their country's flag. But something important, despite that, today, Cambodian media reported something really interesting, which honestly nobody saw coming. According to those local Cambodian media reports, they say that the fighting between Thailand and Cambodia has actually stopped. That's right, after 11 days of fighting, at least 50 soldiers being killed and dozens of airstrikes taking place, the fighting seems to have stopped. Now, I will say that neither Cambodia or Thailand have officially confirmed that they've signed any ceasefire deals, so it's possible it's just a pause in the fighting. Although a few days ago, one country said they're going to try and get a peace deal signed, and that was China. They said, quote, "We will send a representative in an effort to bridge the two sides to rebuild peace." It's possible that's happened, and they've signed a peace deal now because of China. China. China said, quote, "As a friend and close neighbour of Cambodia and Thailand, we closely follow the ongoing conflict and have shuttled between the two sides to promote peace through our own way." Now, so far through this fighting over the last 11 days, neither side has confirmed how much damage they've taken or how much losses they've taken. But at a bare minimum, we do know that at least dozens of Thai and Cambodian soldiers have been killed on the fighting, as you'd expect, plus dozens of airstrikes have taken place. Not to mention that Thailand has claimed they've invaded Cambodian territory and taken it as their own. But today, there might be peace. The fighting, at least according to Cambodian media reports, might have actually stopped. Now, at the start, I said Israel signed a $35 billion deal with Egypt. But before I talk about that, I'll tell you something else that's happened. But the Egypt thing you need to know about. But first, an American nuclear scientist was just killed in his home today. Although, according to reports, he might have discovered something huge and he was silenced before he could tell the world about it. In fact, it gets worse. The person who reportedly killed him has not been found yet. Apparently, the police don't even have any idea as to where he is. The US police said, quote, "We are treating this as an active and ongoing homicide investigation." But you need to know that this nuclear scientist was actually a professor at MIT, so he was really quite smart. Now, I will say that this professor was actually Jewish. He was very pro-Israeli, and a lot of pro-Israel media outlets have jumped on this and said he was probably killed because of his beliefs. But I'll stick to the facts. The neighbor nearby said that he heard, quote, 3 loud bangs, suggesting that he was shot 3 times, and that kind of is in line with what the police said. But currently, nobody is in custody, and so because of that, we don't know the official motive of why this nuclear scientist was killed. But MIT did release a statement. They said, quote, "Our deepest sympathies are with his family, students, colleagues, and all of those who are grieving." And MIT did say that his personal research was heading in a, quote, "particularly exciting new scientific direction." And because of that, people, as you'd expect, have said he probably came across something which he wasn't meant to know about. And so, somebody tried silencing him by killing him to make sure he couldn't tell the world about it. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, that's just what people are saying. All we know is that this nuclear scientist, this MIT professor, has been killed for some reason. Right, now the next point is this Israel-Egypt $35 billion deal. It's crazy. I certainly saved the biggest piece of news until last. But first, this is where most people would do like a sponsorship deal. These videos don't get any sponsorships. Because we talk about Israel, specifically this Israel-Egypt deal as well, nobody wants to pay us any money on YouTube, TikTok, and things like that. These videos cost money to make. We can't afford to keep making them. They make no money. We're literally funded by you guys that watch the videos. We still make a loss though, so we still need some people to help fund all of this. And for £3 a month, you can join the channel as a member and you can help fund all of these videos. So if you want to help out, there's proof that it's all reinvested into the channel on my website. Go to the top link in the description. It's £3 a month. It means the world. It's less than the price of a coffee every month, and we give you all the news you need. You don't need to read the news anywhere else, and we do it really quickly, so it saves you loads of time too. Top link in the description. Thank you everyone, it means a lot. Right, but Israel just signed their biggest ever deal worth $35 billion with Egypt, but it's not what you think. In fact, this deal is so big and it's worth so much money that it's going to massively help Israel fund their war on Gaza. And so Egypt, as you'd expect, is facing a lot of criticism for this. This deal is actually so big that Egypt has put all of their eggs in one basket, and Israel is now their main supplier of gas. That's kind of #1 rule of a country, is don't put all your eggs in one basket, but regardless, Egypt has still done it for some reason. Even Netanyahu said, quote, "This deal greatly strengthens Israel's position as a regional energy power." He also said, quote, "It contributes to stability in our region," and that's something to focus on. Because Egypt has put all of their eggs in one basket, they're now reliant on Israel, meaning they can't afford to annoy Israel, or Israel will cut off their gas. So Egypt buying this gas from Israel is effectively Egypt saying they're always going to be allies with Israel, regardless of what Israel does, simply because Egypt can't afford to have their gas cut off. Over the last few months, it's worth knowing, Egypt has faced a massive energy crisis. They haven't had enough energy to power their homes all across the country. Although today that does seem to be about to change now. They found this new supplier in Israel, and they're about to get a huge amount of gas. Obviously, as you'd expect, Egypt is facing a huge amount of backlash for doing this deal with Israel. Nobody really supports the funding of Israel's war on Gaza, geopolitically. But I will say, Egypt is trying to keep it quiet. They haven't really spoke on this deal, and that's simply because it doesn't look good for them. They don't want the world to know that they're supporting the war on Gaza. In fact, I'm one of the only people covering the news on this. Anyway, all of this news today is really important, but yesterday Iran announced that they're sending drones to Venezuela, and Venezuela is now being supported by Russia, Iran, and China against the US. These Iranian drones are the best in the world, and the US is really worried over this. Knowing all of this news I've told you today is important, but it's far more important to know the more important things, like Iran doing this with Venezuela. So to make sure you didn't waste your time, click here to watch that video about Iran sending drones to Venezuela, which Venezuela is about to use to bomb the US.